I am out here getting eaten alive for one of my favorite wild foods, Spicebush. I don't want to say Spicebush berry because I actually use all the parts of this plant. We use the berries when cooking. Particularly, we love it on wild game or in stews. But we use the leaves and the twigs in our smoky taboo tea, and that is one of y'all's favorite and one of my favorites. And that says a lot about its flavor. It complements smoke really well, whether in the meat like I mentioned or in the smoky taboo tea, as it's got a sort of black pepper allspice flavor. Oh wow, there are too many mosquitoes. Be right back. Okay, let's try that again. It's got a sort of allspice black pepper flavor. I would say this can be compared to the flavor of the whole plant. The leaves and the stems are much milder than the berries. And on that note, let it be known, this is actually my favorite time to harvest them. It's early September, late August, because half of the plant has the green berries and the other half has the red berries. And both are great, but entirely different flavors. The green young berries have more of a peppercorn type flavor, whereas the red has more of a allspice type flavor. That's really just the closest comparable thing. The plant itself has this sort of scent too. If it tells you anything, this plant is in the laurel family, which also includes things like cinnamon and sassafras. So it really is very similar to like sassafras and sarsaparilla. I would put it in that group of flavors and scents. So we love it in smoky taboo tea. We love it on our wild game or red meat in general. What else is it good for? It is definitely medicinal. Most plants that are aromatic are very rich in volatile oils and therefore have medicinal properties that you can assume. This plant is considered a diaphoretic, which means that it is going to help our body control its temperature, often by inducing sweating, which makes it a good tea to drink when you have a fever. It's also, because of those volatile oils, very antispasmodic, which is going to make it great for the gut, bloating, gas, indigestion, muscle spasms of any kind. So there's definitely some medicinal properties, some delicious edible properties, some smell properties. Like I would love to make some sort of like wild forager's perfume out of like this and sassafras and sarsaparilla. You can kind of see when I hold it like this, little glimpses of the green and red berries. This plant is interesting because once you, like when you've never found it, you just don't see it, even though it's all around you. And then once you have identified it, you're like, oh wow, it really is everywhere. That's because it's got, you know, the same green color that we see all over the forest. And it's a pretty interesting height, which once you have identified it, height is going to be one of the main defining features for you. Because, let me flip the camera around. When you're out in the woods, you either have these big, beautiful giants, or you have these low-growing things like black cohosh, ferns, you know, woodsy type stuff. Oh, so itchy from those darn mosquitoes. Sorry, slight distraction. And once you notice Spicebush, that's what all this undercarriage is right here. We have a huge Spicebush grove. This is sort of like bushy, but also kind of like a sapling. Right? It's an interesting one. So, oh, here's some of the green berries. Once you spot it out, it's pretty easy. And while I'm looking at these berries, I want to show you they grow pretty interestingly. They're not dangling at all. They're just very close to the stalk. Now, the best way to preserve both the berries, the twigs, the leaves, any part that you want to use is by dehydrating or drying it. We actually dehydrate these berries in our oven on a very low heat. We've got a fan in our oven, which is very helpful, but I have found that dehydrating the berries with heat is a lot easier. It's how peppercorns are dried too. So they end up looking just like a peppercorn or an allspice berry once dried. The leaves and the twigs have very little moisture, so you could throw those on just like a plain drying rack and they're gonna dry pretty quickly for you. I'm gonna have to cut this short because I got completely attacked by mosquitoes and I'm dying of itches, but I think that's just about all I had to say anyways. Typically we'll all three come out here together with our hip pouches on and just sit here and glean the berries off of this big old spicebush grove, and we try to get a quart-sized jar of berries to last us all year. We end up going through most of them in the winter because that's when we're eating the majority of our stews and our wild game, and that's really what it complements. I actually harvest the leaves and twigs to dry for the smoky taboo tea pretty much year round. This is an evergreen, so it's not a plant that totally dies back. I really wanted to show you guys the black cohosh. Maybe I can just do it really quick. This is the time of year when black cohosh is starting to die back. And the reason that I want to point that out at this phase is because this is when you're going to want to, when you're going to want to grab a stake or something to mark where the plant is, so you can come back in a month or so and dig these roots up. Very potent medicine. When I'm digging these roots, I'll talk a little bit more about it. Defining characteristics of all cohosh pretty much is this 3-prong here. You know, you've got your stalk, it comes up, you've got this 3-prong that opens up into the leaflets. It flowers in late July here, so that's another really great way to find the plants around you, is to look for those gorgeous tall white flowers. And that's a really good way to make sure that you don't have doll's eyes, which is a very close look-alike cohosh. So please keep that in mind and get familiar with what that looks like before you dig this medicine. So here is what our black cohosh looks like right about now. You see it's got these nice toothy leaves and they're starting to brown, and this plant is just pretty much getting ready to die back.